This is the Last of Us podcast on TV Podcast Industries. This time we're chatting about The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3, The Path.
What I want is what you used to give people. I want justice. Because it's either that, or we do nothing. That's what everyone else out there is going to do for us. Nothing. A whole world of people who won't lift a finger if something bad happens to me or you. We have a word for these people. They're called strangers. Well, I don't think that we're strangers to each other. And I want to know that I can count on you. And I swear, if someone hurts any of you or the people you love, you can count on me. That's what holds all this together. Not potluck dinners or New Year's Eve dances. Definitely not a wall, because that thing got busted through, but Jackson is still here. I'll accept whatever the council decides, but I am asking you, please, do what it takes to see that justice is done. Not for me. Not even for Joel. I am asking you, please, do it for us.
Welcome back, fellow survivors, to the Last of Us podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're on to the third episode of Season 2, The Path. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow fun guys. Yes, I am one of your other hosts, John. Welcome back to the podcast.
The mushroomiest podcast about The Last of Us you'll ever find, I think.
Absolutely. What's not to like about mushrooms?
Well, true. Yes. No.
Unless they're attacking you and trying to eat your brains
yes.
and gain your knowledge, I guess.
Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't ever happen. The mushroom uprising is not something we're looking forward to.
No. That would be sort of from left field if we got a mushroom uprising. I'd love to know what would happen with an aubergine uprising.
No, but quite literally, the mushrooms are in the left field, the aubergines are in the right field. So it would be the left field uprising.
Yes.
We almost had our third host along with us tonight, John.
But he got waylaid by mushrooms.
Well, no, unfortunately, work got in the way. But we hope to have Chris joining us for the next couple of episodes of The Last of Us. Moving on, since we finished off our Daredevil coverage last week, officially, we finished our final wrap-up of Daredevil last week. So Chris has now got one night a week free, and that night might be taken up with The Last of Us if he's able to organise his timing. Otherwise, we'll have to wait until another show comes to Wednesdays for Chris to join us.
Yes, absolutely. Christoph. Make room for mushrooms.
I knew I'd get you there. John. But I hope our wonderful fellow survivors have been enjoying the second season of The Last of Us. After last week's episode, I think it was good to take a bit of a breather in episode 3 of the series to see kind of how everybody's dealing with the situations that are going on.
No, definitely. I mean, I think you do need that sort of out breath.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
After what we saw in episode 2 for
After
sure.
The plunge, yeah.
It is really important to sort of take stock of that emotional high, because it is really, really, really emotional when you're dealing primarily with two principal characters. Then it becomes much bigger. Yes, I get it. There's Maria, there's Tommy, there's a whole host of other characters, but the story primarily resolves around 2 characters, and that has gone down to 1.
Well, the first season was around 2 characters and went down to 1. Certainly, yeah, absolutely. I think this season is really talking about the expansion to 2 very different characters and multiple characters in the show. Yeah,
but what I mean is, in that, even the opening credits, if you did spot, in terms of all that mycelial sort of network opening credit, you only get 1 mushroom at the end representing Ellie. There are not 2. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I thought it was really cool, actually, because you do realize then you're dealing with a production team that are really focused about detail.
Absolutely,
That, with the death of that other mushroom silhouette in the opening credits, which is Joel, he dies, they have removed it, and there's just a single one. Because I did say it as it was happening.
You did?
I wonder if we'll just have the one sort of fungus representing Ellie.
Yeah.
And you were kind of a little bit skeptical.
Well, I didn't have time to be skeptical. It was like 10 seconds later it appeared on screen. But that's the kind of quality you get from HBO. It's the kind of quality you get from these writers, these production people that are behind it. We all remember how the Game of Thrones opening credits changed every week to represent what the story was going to tell you that week, which is a huge amount of work, but became really important. It became something that the fans are really excited to see every week. What area of Westeros are we going to be going and spending time in this week? With The Last of Us being a show about two characters traveling across the country in the first season and now in the second season expanding in a different way, this is the start of the new show is telling you, well, one of the characters is gone now, and now Ellie's all on her own. It's being set up right there in the opening credits. So even the opening credits are feeding into the story, which I think is really cool. It's really cool. But before we get into our discussion about this episode, just want to remind you can go over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and subscribe to the podcast on any immune or infected podcast player if you haven't already. There's 11 years actually of TV Podcast Industries podcasts over there for you to listen to, including our coverage of season 1 of The Last of Us. You can also leave a voicemail for us over there. We'd love to hear your voice on the podcast for any of your thoughts on the shows that we cover. You can also send us emails to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or join us over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, where there's a spoiler post up for every one of the episodes of the shows that we cover. I know the other thing that we're going to be covering later in the week, we're going to be going to the cinema again to cover Thunderbolts. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about the Thunderbolts if you had a chance to see that. Yeah,
definitely.
And the last thing to remind you of, we are continuing our World's End pub quiz for season 2 of The Last of Us. Later in this episode, we'll have a question on each podcast, and all you need to do at the end of the season is email us with your 7 correct answers to feedback@TV Podcast Industries, and you could be in with a chance of getting your hands on a copy of The Last of Us season 2 or a €50 Amazon voucher, which you can put towards The Last of Us goodies.
Indeed you can. So, fellow quizzers and fellow survivors / fun guys, yes. Please get involved with the World's End pub quiz. But I think with that, let us get on to some of the episode details of The Last of Us episode 3, The Path. Derek, who gave us what, where, when, how, and why?
Well, the show is, of course, based on the 2020 PlayStation game The Last of Us Part 2 by Neil Druckmann and Hayley Wiggum-Gross from game publisher Naughty Dog. You were surprised, John, that the game came out in 2020. Despite the fact that I've said the last 2 episodes, I'm not gonna hold you the coals for that. You sometimes ignore what I say. It's fine. But this is the big thing, that this game came out in a time when the world was going through a massive pandemic, and this sequel to one of the most well-known games about a realistic type of pandemic taking over the world. The sequel came out in, I think, July of that year. So a couple of months after everybody was in lockdown, they suddenly had to deal with this game about the worst case scenario of a nightmare.
Well, absolutely. I think I just probably
pandemic.
Blocked it out of my mind, to be honest. Yeah.
You kind of think of the remastered date, like 2021 or 2022, when it was remastered on PlayStation 5, maybe as the real release date. Yeah. But the show, of course, is written and executive produced by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. This episode, once again, written by Craig Mazin, who wrote the first 2 episodes of the series. And this episode directed by Peter Hoar. We know Peter Hoar so well on this podcast. We've covered so much of his stuff, but particularly on The Last of Us. He directed episode 3 of last season, which has been well known as the Bill and Frank episode. I think it was nominated for lots and lots of awards, as it should have been an excellent episode of the show. But we've also talked about him here because he directed episodes of the Defenders shows. He directed episodes of Daredevil, Iron Fist, directed some of the other Marvel shows like The Runaways.
Absolutely.
Really
Runaways,
cool.
Cloak and Dagger as well, which I loved.
Really cool. But he also worked quite closely with Russell T Davies. He's been directing episodes of Doctor Who over the years, including 2 episodes for the brand new season of Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, which has been excellent so far. I've absolutely loved that. But he's also directed many episodes of the Russell T Davies show It's a Sin, which won awards around the world. An excellent story about the AIDS crisis or the AIDS pandemic in the 80s.
Yeah. We love Peter Hoar on this podcast, and so well done, Peter, for being involved on The Last of Us. We absolutely love this director's stuff.
Yeah, he's just got a really good touch with the drama between people, and that's really the core of what he directs well. And there's a lot of that in this episode.
Absolutely.
There was obviously the Bill and Frank episode had a lot of that as well, but it's great to have him back on this show along with all the other shows he's been doing. So thank you, Peter, for your contributions to all the stuff we talked about in TV podcast industries. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3, The Path?
Sure. While Tommy says goodbye to Joel in the morgue, Ellie has to recover from the injuries Manny inflicted on her. 3 months later, Ellie is finally released from hospital, and Dina tells her that the group who killed Joel are members of the Washington Liberation Front Wolves that are from Seattle. Before setting out for vengeance, Tommy convinces Ellie to bring the case to the townspeople of Jackson, but despite her best efforts, the council deny their support. Later that night, Dina teams up with Ellie to pursue Joel's killers on their own. When they arrive in Seattle, it looks deserted, and Ellie and Dina note the lack of WLF members. Meanwhile, a convoy of dozens of soldiers march through the streets of Seattle with several armoured vehicles. Yes, a little army, I think. Or a big army.
Well, absolutely.
Or a medium-sized army. We don't know yet.
It really connects to that moment, and I'm sure we'll talk about lots of the stuff as we go through our points, but it really does connect to that moment when Ellie goes, well, nobody's ever really talked about the Wolves before, so they must be a really small force. And then they get down to Seattle, and it's like, there's going to be a much bigger force than they think.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those things where, yes, maybe in the scheme of things, say, compared to the Fireflies, it is small.
Yeah.
But it's a city-wide thing. So
that's what it seems
it's
like,
big.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost a bit like the city-states of Renaissance Italy, where it's just like, except, they've developed all these armies to survive the apocalypse and to survive the infected. But in effect, they've all got these standing armies. Each city are like these contained because they don't move very far. They have a limited field of range. Then they're all there serving to defend this one city. So they might not be small, but they're dedicated and they're big for if you're going into that city.
And also it depends on how quickly they overran the Fedra agents that were in the city, the government agents that were in the city, and took their equipment and took their supplies and took their armored vehicles.
Yeah, and we've seen this before in season 1, really, where you have Ellie and Joel leaving Boston and ending up in Kansas City, where there's also kind of a militia there.
Yeah.
That is defending Kansas City.
And they've overthrown Fedra there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It might be Fireflies, but, how connected they are, you don't know. Again, it's almost like these city-states have developed in order to protect or survive, effectively, these areas.
Yeah. But overthrowing Fedra in your local state and taking it over makes you seem like a pretty powerful group as well. So what an interesting way to close out the episode. But before we get to closing out the episode, let's get into our top points for this episode. Let's start right at the beginning. Our point number 1, Joel's body. I think this opening of the episode is kind of the breath that you need after how last episode closed.
Yes.
I liked how it was set up. There was the reverential side of the mortician effectively cleaning Joel's body. His head is covered. You only know it's him because of the watch that's on his hand, which he's had right back from the first episode given to him by his daughter Sarah. But there's just a lot of reverence being paid to Joel here when he's laid out. I just thought it was a nice way to start the episode. And I'd say if you're watching these back to back, if you were binging them, you would feel that breath after the way the last episode ended.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, it as you say, it's just that point to see that, Jesse, Dina and Ellie made it back from the ski lodge to Jackson. So it's not only that, but you also see the extent of the aftermath of the Battle of Jackson as well, outside the front gates. Yeah. You see all the clickers sort of, after they've sent the sort of barrels of petrol and gasoline over the walls. You see the damage that's inflicted on the infected. And like the scale of that, yet they also still breached and like huge numbers got through into Jackson. I do like the fact that actually the clickers, and I only clocked this the second time I watched it. I think the first time I watched it, maybe it was a little light, but the second time was at night, so it was a bit darker. So, but the clicker looked like Groot. So all I could think of was that they had killed Groot.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I mean the clicker looked like Groot. It was very disconcerting, really,
Just a bit.
But nonetheless, all jokes aside, you have that reverence of someone having died,
but it's just taking care of,
and all that, and literally as well, we do get a bit later about they have a burial ceremony. We don't see any of that, but these bodies are being prepared not just for a mass grave, not even dare I say it, which is kind of the way I was thinking that they would be burnt, because I have to say that initial thing, the initial scene of seeing sort of the clicker Groot at the start,
right,
because it was so light, I was like, oh, is that inside Jackson? And then I was thinking, oh, is this like a mass sort of infected grave pit where, because I just was expecting then to see it just set alight, but that wasn't the case. It was outside. But equally, I was like, they're spending the time showing the cleaning, the washing, and the preparing for burial of Joel's body, because him, along with other members of Jackson who died in the attack, are being buried. It's that time-honored tradition that even in amongst this apocalyptic world, where you can give time, because sometimes you don't see that. It's almost the opposite. It's like, we haven't got time to mourn the dead because, we're being chased by a ton of, but Jackson is different. There's a semblance of the previous world. And so they're able to provide that time to have this, sort of burial, ceremony, process, protocols, tradition take place, and so I kind of like that. And
absolutely. And what I loved about it was the focus that's been given to it by the director and the writer here. It's focused on Joel's body. He's the body that's being cleaned as Tommy walks into the room. We do get that moment where Tommy kind of notices the watch again on Joel's wrist and instantly says to him, "Give Sarah my love," knowing that he's now gone to the afterlife with his daughter is what Tommy's saying here. It's a lovely moment between the two of them, and for us, the audience who spent time with Joel, but it's the way the camera pans back and shows the morgue room with many other dead bodies in there that have all gone through the same process. It's allowing us to process the death of Joel with Tommy seeing him for the first time. But it's also saying he's not the only one.
Agreed.
And that's something that is repeated throughout the episode here. Everybody's in mourning. Everybody has been affected by the attack on the city. But there is a little bit of reverence, I suppose, towards Joel because of his leadership position in the town. But lots of people have lost people that were very close to them as well. So it's something that becomes really important. I think just the eye of the director on the top of that saying to us as the audience, yes, one person has passed, but look how many people have and look how many people are left almost. But that's not the only part of this scene. The other part is Ellie waking up from the pain that she's been in when she's been brought in by Dina and Jesse. We see her waking up, being treated by a doctor here. I didn't realize how serious her injuries were. Back in the first episode, we saw her sitting up on the horse coming back with Jesse. She wasn't on her own horse, so we knew she couldn't ride her own horse back. But here we see that she's in massive pain. She can hardly breathe from the injuries, like as if she had a punctured lung from the kick that she got from Manny. When he was
broken ribs and punctured lung. Like it looks like they're draining fluid from the side. But I mean, this to me was kind of, sometimes you see that kick to the guts and you think, nothing as such comes of it. But it's like, it's with a heavy boot. It's a hard kick and it causes damage.
Exactly.
And this is the damage here. It's also that Ellie in hospital, having just been administered. The other thing is, like in the morgue, it's a different kind of reflection of what's happening at this moment in Jackson. it's not just focused on Ellie. It shows you everything that those people in Jackson who happen to have the knowledge, the skills to be a doctor, a nurse, or are volunteering, are having to deal with a whole rake of different injuries.
A massive triage hospital, really, for everything that's gone on, isn't it?
And then you focus in on Ellie, where you see, whatever the fluid, the pressure being released from her lungs.
It's just a breathing when, you can tell that she's laboured, but it's not that's causing the real pain that's inside her. We see the flash where she's seeing Joel be killed, and then it's just that primal scream that she releases at the thought that Joel's gone and that she couldn't save him and that she's here strapped up and in pain, and they have to knock her out because she just can't stop screaming at the loss that she's just experienced.
No, exactly.
This is the biggest emotional moment for Ellie that we've seen all the way throughout season 1. She's someone that covers up her pain with sarcasm all the time. She never really allowed herself to experience that type of emotion before, but this loss is so massive for her that she just releases it in this primal scream. It's an amazing moment, and then leading into the opening credits. But this is kind of the flashback for the episode. Once again, we're starting a few months before the time when the rest of the episode will take place.
And this is where then we see now only one person in the opening room credits.
Exactly.
At the end. But I think on to point number 2 here, which is 3 months later. We have Ellie getting checked out of the hospital. She seems to be able to give a good old puff into that lung capacity tester thing that I always remember from the GP.
Oh yeah.
Don't know what it's called, but
he gives a 3-letter acronym for it, and I just didn't take it down.
And then I do like the fact then that we get Gale.
Yes, we do.
I'm really pleased we just got this little moment back with Gale in this episode, because I was thinking that we were only going to get that moment between her and Joel, and a bit of we see her at the New Year's Eve dance and with all the commotion. We do see her again here as well at the town council. I'm really glad we got a bit more of Catherine O'Hara here. And in particular, you have actually, Gale's sarcasm marries really nicely with Ellie's kind of, pop therapy here, or playing along with Gale's questions. Yeah,
they're both just being sarcastic at each other, and they both know, I think, Ellie's saying all the right things that she probably read, herself in a psychology book at some point, and Gale knows the game that Ellie's playing. Of course she does. She's had people like this throughout her entire career. I love the line that she says where she's like, how would I get any alcohol or weed if everybody was as healthy as you are, Ellie? It's like, I know what the game you're playing, but I think you're good enough. You've had enough time now.
Agreed. But I also like the moment she kind of slightly puts Ellie off kilter, where she asks her about Joel's arguments and informs Ellie about what he said to her in their last therapy session. You can see that touches something, but then she soon recovers to hide it. And I think this is the great thing about the acting here, is just you really spot that just purely through the nuance of Bella Ramsey's performance.
They're so good in this role. Just Bella Ramsey commits to the character so well, and just little nuances in the performance throughout the show, but particularly in an episode that hangs on Ellie like this does.
Oh yeah, they're excellent.
Yeah, so good.
So well done. It's so well observed, and it's, as you say, around Peter Hall's kind of real knack of focusing in on this interaction between two very strong people. And sort of both knowing those tricks of the trade that have got them through, probably way more intelligent, and adversarial towards one another than they really think. Absolutely. So I just really enjoyed this little sort of check-in of Gale in order for Ellie to check out of the hospital.
Exactly. It's almost like Gale saying, well, I guess Ellie's got her mind about her enough that she'll be okay in the world now.
Yes.
That's about as far as I can get. I know Ellie's traumatized, but she can get out of here and leave the hospital, I think is about as far as Gail gets. But we have another, I think, amazing performance from Bella here when she goes over to Joel's house.
Well, her house.
Well, yes, no, she has moved out of the house, which is the moment where
garage.
she walks into where she walks into her old bedroom, and it looks like her 14, 15-year-old bedroom,
yes,
which is different from the place that we've seen Ellie live in the first couple of episodes. But there's just so much emotion in the character walking into the former home she lived in with Joel.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. There's just the breakdown when she sees the coat that Joel wore, well, pretty much throughout season 1, all the time that she spent with him over the year when they were traveling together to eventually get to Jackson. The breakdown just at seeing that one item of clothing, it's so realistic and so I've lost a lot of people over my life. There is that moment when you see an item of clothing that just spurs those feelings inside you, and Joel was so important to Ellie. And this overwhelming emotion that she's feeling at his loss is just perfectly played by Bella. And interrupted by Dina downstairs. And I was kind of going, God, if Dina just hadn't arrived, you would actually have Ellie being able to experience and sit in that emotion for a minute, which we all need. Yeah. We all need to mourn the loss of a loved one and have that time to do it. And it feels like Ellie's going from place to place with this revenge in her mind, with this anger behind her. And if she had been able to release the emotion here, she wouldn't be as cocky as she is going off later on in the episode. I don't know, but it feels like she just needed another couple of minutes to be in that moment of mourning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. I think, it's great now to get Dina's arrival here. And yeah. I think, I love the fact she comes with cookies. I love the fact that they're a peace offering, and kind of you see Ellie saying, what's that about? And it's ultimately that, in the hospital, Ellie had been asking about information that Dina remembered, and she didn't say anything because she wanted to let Ellie recover, because if she had told her what she knew, out would come all the tubes and it would be pandemonium, basically.
Yeah. But she even explains it I could see you pulling the tubes out of your wrists with your teeth and crawling along the ground to get after the people. If I didn't let you recover, you never would have recovered effectively.
And I think there's 2 moments in this episode where you just see that kind of grounding that Dina provides. I mean, firstly, she knows how to deal with Ellie, hence the cookies, the peace offering, and so on. And, later on, you get Ellie pushing the cookies back to her so that she can take one. Yeah. And you have one later on, which we'll come to in one of our other points, where they head off on the road. Yeah. And I just really like this calming influence of Dina. But she does, she gives up a number of different elements here.
It's the big list. She gives up the names of everybody and where they are and what group they're affiliated with.
Exactly.
She has enough information for Ellie to go on to find the people that killed Joel. It's a huge map of what's going to happen and what Ellie now needs to do. She now has that list, just like the revenge flicks of the 80s. She now knows exactly who she has to go after, who killed her dad. That's the idea of this here. And Dina just does such a great job, as you said, of prepping Ellie for it so that Ellie doesn't fly off the handle at her. Why did you keep this information from me? Yeah, she gets to say it, but she also, at the end of the explanation from Dina, goes, oh, you can have a cookie now. We're okay.
Well, as Dina says, I wasn't going to tell anyone before you. So yes, I'm telling you
massively
3 months later, but I've not told anyone. She gets into trouble from Tommy for that.
Yes, she does.
Don't you ever hold back any information like that from me again. Otherwise you'll be on rendering duty.
Yeah.
But also,
I was trying to work out what rendering duty is in this time when we're in the post-apocalypse. Is it rendering waste products into water? Because that's the thing that I'm going is something really bad.
That's all I had, tanning and leather and
maybe
I don't know.
Yeah. It's either a really boring job or a really disgusting job. It has to be one or the other, doesn't it?
I think basically it does. But I mean, also I think I did like Dina's sort of moment of, she knows that they're heading to Seattle and she goes, but what's the point in us going after them when the thing that we know is where they're heading to? So let them get there so that we get there and then we find them in Seattle. So I like
brilliant justification from Dina there.
Yeah, I think Dina's really shown her smarts there. And I just like how this plays out between the two of them.
Honestly, Isabella Mercado is such a great addition to the show. She's so great on screen. She's perfect with Ellie. She's perfect with Tommy. She can manage everybody around. She's great with Jesse as well. So, really happy that she's joined the season in this role as Dina. Really, really good. We move on to our next point because it really does kick off from there, from Dina's reveal, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the Jackson vote. And I think just before that, they do tell Tommy. Yeah. So it's Ellie's the first person that Dina tells, and then they both go to Tommy. And
love this scene.
It is really good, isn't it? Because I like how this kind of ebbs and flows throughout. It's like, as he says, I'm not saying you shouldn't do this, but we have to do it properly. This has got to go to town council and everyone has got to have a say in whether we go. And actually, you realize the brutality a bit of it, even though there's talk of justice. When Maria says to go after the people that killed Joel in order to execute them. Like it's not a half measure.
A group of 16 people going after them to find them and execute them for
it's
the
not
murder
a half
of Joe.
measure.
Oh, absolutely not.
So I like that Tommy kind of stands his ground here. And, you see Ellie, she kind of doesn't quite understand Tommy's reluctance. It's almost like she wants him to be gung-ho, like she has in her mind. And I like the way he says, don't make it out as though I didn't know him. He was my brother.
I absolutely. Again, Gabriel Luna is such a great actor. He's someone that I really want to see more of in the show. I want to see so much more of him in The Last of Us. But even these little moments that he gets, which show his power. But it's not just a line. It's more than that. It's that Ellie's going, why don't you follow me like Joel would? Why don't you go after me like Joel would go after the people that murdered me? Tommy's saying, I wouldn't do that because that's not me. I'm not Joel. But also, don't tell me I don't know my brother. Every time we've lost someone in the past, Joel took it on board himself. It was a pain on his back. He didn't go out for revenge on someone that had already been lost, effectively. That's what they say. He never went after the people that killed the people they lost. He just took it as a pain that it was his fault that he lost them. And that's not what Ellie's doing here. Ellie's not taking that pain on board that she's the one that got Joel killed. She's saying she wants to make the people pay that killed Joel, and Tommy's going, that's not something he'll do.
He's wanting it to go through the process of Jackson.
Yeah. And there's a really
I think it's a really good thing that comes from it, because I think the whole council meeting is really important.
It is, and there's also just one little touch that I love that they included in the episode, because I know, John, myself and you watched The House of Cards when it was on Netflix, their first show that was on, all about the machinations behind the scenes of Washington, where, if you want to vote, you have to scratch this guy's back, and you have to talk to this guy, and have to talk to this woman, and get their votes before the vote. And there's a great moment here where Ellie tries to do that with Jesse, where she gets Jesse over to teach her and do some training with him and show him how strong she is so that she can get an idea of what way he's going to vote. And Jesse pushes back against her and goes, you're not going to learn what way I'm going to vote in advance of the vote. We don't do that here in Jackson. I just think it's really interesting that she's trying to use some manipulation on Jesse. Yeah. But it's me. We're best friends. We're really close together. I just want to know what way you're going to vote. That's Ellie's perspective. And Jesse looks at her and goes, write down everything you want to say, because if you go in there and speak in anger, they're going to vote against you, because nobody is going to vote with anger in Jackson. So he gives her some advice.
Yeah, no one's going to vote for anger. And that's it. It's a really good moment. I think it's...
Love Jesse. Yeah.
It shows a really nice element of Jackson around, hearing everyone's voice. And I that's really important. It's funny. We have the guy sort of waffling on about we should be, corn, whilst it's difficult to sort of grow, it grows well and it produces a lot. And in the end, it's like Maria's just like, right, no, hang on a second. We'll move on to the next point, which is why everyone's here, which is the proposal that we send 16 people out to, find these people and execute them.
But it's like, Scott, look, the whole point of you getting an opportunity to talk here is that you talk about this. Oh, I have no real opinion on the Seattle thing. But the point is that everybody has a chance to speak about this particular issue. And if you look at the sheet that's in front of Maria, there's about 15 people that have gone before Scott as well. And there's another 4 or 5. And then eventually it's going to get to Ellie, who's going to be able to stand up and make her case. But everybody has an opinion about this. And Scott is taking the opportunity to talk about crops.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I just like how it progressed. You had Rachel, who was talking about, she lost her own husband, lots of people that were lost. And, there's a need for sort of regrouping, building back up the strength. And like, we know you're hurt, but we're too hurt too soon. That's what she says. Mm-hmm. You then move on to Carlisle, who's like, no, we need to forgive and be forgiven. There needs to be mercy here. And this is then where you get Seth intervening, who opposes that, saying, you're acting like children, you're acting like victims in a sense. We need to make them pay, so that nothing like this happens again. Otherwise, what happens? And then you have Ellie, who sort of reads out her thoughts. She has taken Jesse's advice on board here, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Absolutely. And I loved the fact that the biggest supporter was Seth, the guy beforehand. He's the guy that threw the homophobic slur at the two of them at the New Year's party. But it's also the fact that he's the one that does speak in anger. He says everything, I think, that Ellie probably would have said if she hadn't taken Jesse's advice and hadn't written it down. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you people? Somebody attacked us. Somebody killed Joel. We need to pay them back, or else we need to go out and take revenge on them, or they're going to come back again. They know we're weak now because they got to Joel. That's what Seth says. But Ellie takes a really good stance on it, going, well, you know what? If you lose someone that you love, I will be there to defend them. I've lost someone that I love. We need to stand up for each other, or else we're nothing.
And she also brings it back to possibly, quite an old school thought, or, pre-infected, the notion of courts and that we have justice. Now,
yes.
And it's partly why I was taken aback, and maybe this is a difference in sort of concepts of justice about then when Maria kind of reiterated, is send these people out in order to regret them and execute them. So that's justice rather than necessarily. Because, of course, the interesting thing about all of this is that only Ellie has the strongest suspicion as to why Abby and her group did what they did.
Yes, absolutely.
And after Abby, it's Gail who has some idea that something happened between these two based on the therapy. Yeah. No one else has any notion as to the causes for this attack on Joel.
Yeah.
Except for Tommy.
Yeah.
And so this is the interesting dynamic at play. As the audience, we're armed with that information, that knowledge. Yeah. Yet we're seeing a discussion played out in all good faith.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have all the facts to hand, and whether that would change something. So it's all really interesting.
Absolutely. It's also not, let's send 16 people out to capture these people, bring them back to a trial where we will decide who's guilty and who's innocent. Which is
my notion of justice.
Exactly, yeah.
But Ellie has a very different notion of justice.
We're back in the Wild Wild West right there.
It really is. And so... but ultimately then, despite that fairly measured, and I thought it was a really good speech from Ellie.
Me too, yeah.
I liked just how it went down.
Yeah. I was pretty proud of her to get to that point,
And well, she says, we do this or we do nothing. Like, these people are strangers, and there is an element of justice that needs to be served here.
Yeah. Do we want to be left in a world of people that do nothing for us and we do nothing for each other? It feels like a strong speech, and it does feel like a moment when Ellie's going to get her way, that maybe not 16 people, maybe they'll go, well, we can't spare 16, we can spare 4, something like that. But it turns out that it's an overwhelming majority that says no.
Yeah.
It's
8-3.
It's 8-3. Yeah. Like a massive. Also, you're looking at the group around a group of the council and going, okay, well, we know Maria, we know Jesse, we know Tommy. Are those the 3 votes? Or did one of those people vote against and somebody else voted for? You know, did Maria and Tommy and Jesse go on the side of Ellie, or did one of them say no? One of them say maybe this is not the way to do it. It wouldn't surprise me if that's something that we learn later, that one of them voted against Ellie being involved or sending 16 people out to murder other people. You know, in the eye for an eye way. But I really loved it. Again, it's more color to add to this world of The Last of Us, and something that we probably didn't see much of in the game, because you're trying to play a game, you're trying to get back to being in control of a character. So sitting in a room listening to speech is probably not something that they would have had time for in the game very often. So it's really good color to add what happened here at the Jackson vote. I think we need to move on to our 4th point, though.
Yes, it's another moment with Gail, but this time with Tommy.
Yeah.
As he visits her, watching a baseball match and sharing a beer with her that she's also gotten from her therapy. I kind of like the start of this, is, you know, who does therapy on the therapist? I kind of like that element. And she goes, that's why I'm an alcoholic, kind of straight up. Well,
it's massively important. It's part of the learning process when you become a therapist, is that you must have a session yourself every month, so you're not taking on board everything. But now she is in a post-apocalyptic world where everybody's lost someone in a horrific way, and she's being told, not only do you need to keep that work up, after you've lost the closest person in your life, you're the only person that does it, and you can't talk to anybody else about it. So yeah, of course she smokes weed and gets drunk.
No, exactly. But I liked how Tommy came, trying to pretend it was about something else. Gail kind of sees through it, and
I just want to see if you're okay.
Yeah, and Tommy kind of comes clean with, you just see things that others don't.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want Ellie to lash out like Joel would have done.
Yeah.
But I like that Gail's kind of really frank with him and just says, well, her speech was a lie. And he kind of almost like trying to protect her. But liar is a very different thing from a liar.
Yeah.
And
she's like, Ellie's a liar. She will tell an untruth to get what she wants. That's what she does. It's just, I think it's such a great interaction between these two characters when Gail's effectively telling Tommy, yes, I know you want to take the place of your brother, protect Ellie just like he did in the past, and you're trying to guide her in the best way to live in the future. And she kind of goes, well, you probably can't do that, because the reason why Joel was able to have that relationship with Ellie is because the two of them walked the same path from the start. It wasn't the nurturing that Joel gave Ellie that created her into the person she is today. It's that the two of them were always on the same path, and the two of them bonded because of that. Not because he gave her the best guidance in the world, but because the two of them were probably peas in a pod.
Birds of a feather, peas in a pod. Exactly.
They walked side by side from the start, I think is her version of it.
Yeah, she says nurture only will get you so far, maybe 20%. The rest of it is nature.
Yeah.
And she says, she came to this on her own. That's her thought.
Yeah.
And she was walking side by side with Joel, as you say. And she says, some people can't be saved.
Yeah.
It is in their nature to be a liar, self-destructive, whatever. And this is the truth that is being given by Gail to Tommy about the nature of Ellie.
Yeah. Can she save herself? Because other people can't, and Joel wasn't able to.
Exactly. And we've seen this with the fact that she knows she's immune, and so from a physical point of view, putting herself into danger because of her, that's what she goes, she runs into the burning building.
Yeah.
You can either be the arsonist or you can be the fireman, or you can be the fire brigade of some, it's one or the other.
Exactly. Or you can be the people trapped in the building burning.
I guess the arsonist would be running out actually rather than running in. But you're either the fire starter or the fire extinguisher.
There you go. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed this conversation between Tommy and Gail because it just felt so frank. It felt like the therapy session with Joel that was had
Yeah.
in the earlier episode.
Absolutely.
And it also just shone that light a bit more onto Ellie as a person, because that's the thing. You know, you see the grown-up and the teenager, and you go, well, the grown-up is protecting the teenager, but actually, you know, they're, as you say, peas in a pod. They're there, they're together, they're working together. They've got this relationship for a reason, not, you know, whether it's that they accept the foibles, the weaknesses, the negatives, or whatever, more readily than others.
And I'm sure we talked about it in season 1 of the show as well, but Gail repeats what Joel said to her when she's talking to Ellie earlier on in the episode. Joel said he saved Ellie, and that's what caused the problem. That's what's caused the estrangement between the two of them. But what we probably mentioned in season 1 was Ellie saved Joel, because after the death of his daughter, he was never the same again until Ellie broke down all of those barriers and made her someone worth saving to Joel almost. So that's kind of the big difference. Tommy just can't walk in there and go, well, I'm Joel's brother, and you know, you had such a good relationship with him, why don't you have it with me? I'll tell you what to do, because that's never been Ellie. Ellie had the relationship with Joel because she saved him first, and then Joel couldn't possibly live in a world without her.
It's the moment, the moments aligned, you know?
Exactly.
It aligned. And there were not just the moment, not just the situation, but it was also, there was that similarity as well.
Exactly. I love the addition of this character to the show. She's just added so much, and you know, in the hands of Catherine Hart, are fantastic. Really good. Just one tiny thing I wanted to mention about the start of the scene when she's watching the Little League team with a beer in her hand, absolutely loving it, cheering them on. Tommy walks over to her and is like, "Oh, I didn't know you like baseball." And she's like, "Yeah, this is my team that I used to follow before the apocalypse. They're about as good as this Little League team." As the boy who's doing his run to first base falls over on his face. They're about as good as, that's the team that I used to support before the apocalypse. As a Carolina Panthers fan from American football, I totally understand that feeling, Gail. That's about the level of my team. A different sport, but still, I understand. We move on to our final point, John. Point number 5. On the road again. This time off to Seattle.
Indeed. Yes.
The setup of this, that no matter what the Jackson vote had said, Ellie is going to be going off on the trip to Seattle. She knows where her targets are. The fact that Dina arrives at the door, is banging on the door on her own, knowing that Ellie is packing up to go. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier on, John, Dina's there because she knows Ellie will go off half-cocked with a bag full of guns and one shirt, and that's it.
I loved this. It was like, well, what route are you going? What kind of northwest? Do you have any medical supplies? Like, literally, Ellie has like a tin of beans and a lot of weaponry. And she goes, you're going in effectively like Converse. No chucks. You need boots. We travel smart. We travel light. We can be at the East Gate for 3 a.m. I've gotten the route planned, you know, effectively Dina helping Ellie to prep, and going along with her to support, and we'll go out 3 a.m. in the East Gate between the different sort of guard shifts, and patrols that are happening to keep the Jackson safe. I like the fact then that you have Seth back here, helping with the provisions. And in fact, which is such a great line, given the history actually that they've developed between Seth and Ellie in just literally such a short period of time, that he goes, "I'd come with you, except I caught friendly fire on New Year's Day, the Battle of Jackson." And like Ellie going, "Are you sure it was friendly?"
Did somebody take the opportunity of the infected overrunning the city to give you a shot?
Exactly. It's so good.
I really liked it, but importantly, I will have to give credit to Ellie. Eventually, she does stretch out her hand, does shake Seth's hand after all the things he's done here and all the standing up that he's done, truly proving that he's apologized now. You know, we had a discussion, I think off air actually, I don't think we included it in the podcast, but we had a discussion that Ellie was under absolutely no obligation, in my perspective anyway, that she was under no obligation to accept the apology of Seth after what he said to her on at the New Year's party, just because somebody, Maria in this case, had set up Seth to apologize to Ellie. It's not about the words that anybody says to Ellie. It's about the actions that they make. And that's why she chose this moment to accept his apology and understand that he didn't mean to go as far as he went, let's say, on New Year's, or regretted what he did on New Year's. That's what matters to Ellie. Those earlier moments when he said, "Oh, I'm sorry what I said last night. I was a bit drunk." And her response was, "Oh yeah, everybody says things they would never say when they're drunk." You know, she knew exactly what was in Seth's heart. And I think he's changed and he's understood how bad he was. And that's the moment when she says, "I accept your apology and understand what you've done."
Yeah, or it's understanding the crux of the person, you know, and in this moment, because he is helping her, he advocated for action at the town council.
He's gone completely out of the way for her.
He has, he is effectively supporting what she wants to do. It's that kind of more objective action. It's not about dividing people up based around sexuality, skin color, It's ultimately about just the actions from a day to day. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not making a judgment like they're going against Jackson Council. But still, in that sense, the rules of Jackson, they're doing something wrong. But he is of the same mindset as to why someone needs to go out and get justice, administer a lesson to the wolves, or whatever it might be, in order that Jackson is safer.
But he's also directly supporting Ellie here as well. That's why she forgives him. You know, I really like this whole section of the episode as they head out. It would have been quite easy to have the first opening of the episode where Ellie wakes up 3 months later and then she gets on a horse and gets out on the path to Seattle. But taking a bit of time in these scenes and these moments, I think, is really important for the show to do. It's a big undertaking and it reminds me of things like Game of Thrones, the first 5 seasons. When they made decisions on that show of where they were going to go and things they were going to do, it was always 2 episodes from the point at which they made the decision to the point that they reached the destination of what was going to happen next.
It was part of the reason why the final season, because it was so A to B, B to C, C to D, you know, and so on.
It was like we could have spread this over 3 more seasons by having people travel at the same speed they traveled in the first 5 seasons, but we've invented teleporters somehow. It's magic. So the last season was just all condensed and felt weird in comparison to the previous couple of seasons. Yeah. But the reason why you have these moments is not just to stretch out a series. The reason you have these moments is so that you can touch on things with characters and have them spend time together. I think that's always really important in shows that I watch, to have moments where characters aren't just in action, that they're having moments together. So here we have Ellie visiting Joel's grave for the first time. We heard Tommy say that it's 10 miles outside the town, and she said she wouldn't visit there until she was on the way to Seattle. So we have her visit the grave, putting some coffee beans on the grave. It took me a minute to realize why. But John, do you remember when we played the game, there was this whole kind of banter between Joel and Ellie, where Joel was saying the one thing he misses from the before times was coffee, because he was absolutely obsessed with coffee every single morning. And eventually there's a moment when Ellie tastes coffee for the first time and I was like, oh my God, what is this crap? Because it's bitter. So she would never have experienced it before. And it's an ongoing thing between the two of them, that Joel loves coffee and Ellie has no idea how you could like something that is so bitter on your throat. So her bringing coffee beans to his grave and putting them there, you know, they're probably quite scarce now, being it's how many years after the apocalypse, you know, so her being able to do that, bringing it to him, I feel like it's a nice little touch for a nice connection between the two of them that only they'd understand, you know, which makes sense.
But I like as well, as they're traveling then after that, you know, as they're traveling to Seattle, I kind of like the fact that, okay, they're on back of a horse rather than in a car, but they're doing these travel games. So it's going through the alphabet, naming the bands, and then it's like, we'll start again, and it's like, you know, the first person you killed, and it's like, well, I can't do that one, but I'll tell you the second. Those moments are just kind of interesting. Yeah, you know, it's like they're not looking at number plates or whatever it was that I used to do on the way down to like south of England or whatever, where it's like, well, can you find the newest number plate for the newest cars? As you're going down the M6.
Anything your parents could use to get you through a traffic jam. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I remember the bands game. Absolutely, always fun.
Bands game as well.
Their little extra spin on it, where it has to be a band that both of them think are exceptional. It can't just be any band with a name. Makes it way more difficult.
Absolutely.
How do you get to
Now they've got Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know.
Oh yeah. But again, they have some time together, these two characters. We saw them on New Year's Eve having this big loving moment, actually kissing on the dance floor on New Year's Eve. The scene with Seth, it's the breakup with Joel at that point. And then after that, it's been a nightmare. The last 3 months, as Dina says, have just been funerals and rebuilding of Jackson. That's all that's been going on, and Ellie's been in hospital the whole time. So the two of them having a moment together to discuss the kiss, which they never really got the chance to discuss in the past. Ellie saying I was drunk, and Dina saying I was stoned. Ellie giving it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, how would you raise it? A 6? And it's Dina absolutely not accepting that.
Yeah.
But then we find out that she's back with Jesse.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? The dynamic. But yeah, look, I mean, to me, I say it's interesting, the dynamic, it is, but it's just, I guess that runs the course of a connection sometimes. Is she's on it, she isn't with Jesse, and, she's kind of finding out what that kiss meant to Ellie in this moment. So the 6 out of 10 is a bit of a body blow.
It is. Yeah. But Ellie's Ellie. You don't ask Ellie directly what you think of the kiss. Yeah,
exactly.
You ask her, would you like me to kiss you again? Maybe, rather than asking her to rate it,
I know.
I don't think that's going to get out. That went down well with Ellie, but I loved having these moments again. This is such great characters, and really like the performances. So anytime we get to spend with them, just talking with each other rather than shouting and screaming and crying and shooting, is important before we get there. There's just, I do want to mention in this section, as they're on the road, I want to mention the religious group that we see. I think they're leaving Seattle. They're going through some national park, and we see that there's 2 roads, and it looks like they're following the road away from Seattle, as Ellie and Dina are going there. But just because there's some interesting discussions that are going on there, this is a religious group in the game. Can we say the name of them, John? They're not named in the show.
Seraphites.
They're the Seraphites, who have a prophet that has set up their society, and they follow the teachings of a prophet. But I like the conversation that's going on between the father and daughter, where she's saying, can we not just trust in the prophet to protect us from this? He's going, the prophet's not magic. The prophet just gave us some instructions and things that allow us to build our new society. But the Seraphites believe in those teachings, but not in any kind of magic that will guide them. They need to protect themselves. They have to save themselves. And we hear that they communicate using whistles to give them each guidance of what's going on around them, I suppose. So we have that moment when one of the Seraphites calls out that they all need to hide because there's wolves coming. So this comes almost directly on the back of Dina and Ellie's conversation about the wolves, that nobody's mentioned them before. So there must be a small group. It'll be fine. The Washington Liberation Front, they may have even broken up because they must be tiny since nobody's talking about them. And here we have this group of Seraphites that are so terrified by the arrival of the wolves that they all hide in the forest. And later, Dina and Ellie come across the bodies of that entire group. They've all been slaughtered by potentially the wolves.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of really enjoyed how this kind of bookended in, because I you have them hiding. You kind of introduce this little kid, Constance, who's asking the questions about their religion, their culture, their lifestyle. I love the fact that it's a whistled language. There's loads of whistled languages, some really long standing. So I think when I was looking at this, it was like 80 whistled languages. So,
really?
It's a real kind of, it is a way of communicating. I love that.
Oh yeah, there's that one where they whistle from one side of a mountain to another side of a mountain.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
remember that one. Yeah, as well. But
they really, I like the fact that that's what they're using as their form of at least long distance communication. With in the absence of walkie talkies and radio, maybe
and phones.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this, and I liked how there's that peril, and then they hide, and you wonder kind of what's going to happen. I mean, even the fact that the father figure hands her a hammer to protect herself, but actually he says to them, true protection will be when we're far away from here.
Well, exactly. Do you feel safe with the hammer?
Yeah.
Well,
exactly. And I really kind of liked how, on the other side of that bookend, it's the reaction of Ellie and Dina seeing this massacre that's happened, and seeing Dina throw up after having seen that, and Ellie going in to check it out, and you see Constance, the dead young girl, and them asking that question. Well, if this was the WLF, like, they're killing kids.
Exactly.
Now, we don't know at this stage within the show about the Seraphites either.
Yeah.
Highly religious, possibly cult-like. So
I think because of everybody having the shaved heads and everybody having the marks on their face that are cut into them, including Constance, a young kid, they all have the same markings, and they all dress the same way. All the women have braids, all the men have shaved heads. So that they are one specific group. So if the wolves come across them, they can easily identify that they are part of that group, right?
Yeah.
But it is interesting that they are so terrified of the wolves here after Ellie and Dina thinking that this is just a tiny group. It's probably only 10 or 20 people, and we already have met 5 of them. It's kind of what seems to be going on in Dina and Ellie's head when they're making their plan or not, to go after Abby and her group,
Yeah, exactly.
But they're considerably bigger, it seems.
Well, and we see this later when they arrive in Seattle. I love that kind of vista. That to me looks straight out of the game with the sort of freeway coming into Seattle. I love seeing that, you see that iconic tower in Seattle, sort of decayed and not really a standout feature of the cityscape. It's more of the sort of the main sort of central business district of Seattle. But you look at
the spinning restaurant or the tower restaurant.
It's something like that,
But it's where Manny is positioned, the only member of Abby's team that we see here.
Well, that's it. So it looks
Manny,
empty. It's feeding into this thing that, well, maybe there's not that many people. It looks empty, but then in another area of the city, you have Manny directing people on the ground as to where they can maneuver to, and you see that this maneuvering is like, full up. Well, it's a tank, it's armored vehicles, as well as foot soldiers, heavily armed. So
all with the
WLF
everywhere.
I mean, this might be some part of the WLF.
Could be.
To an extent.
Yeah. It could be moving the entire battalion from one side of the city to the other. Could be.
But again, it's to the point that for Seattle, this is a major force.
And certainly bigger than Ellie and Dina have the guns enough for.
Exactly.
There's totally 2 of them.
And also that, if they were able to, and again, Jackson is saved by the fact that it's so far away, they can't drive there because there's the supply of diesel or gas or whatever, so I like this kind of foreboding that maybe they've misjudged and the situation here with the WLF.
Yeah, absolutely. A nice little closer for the episode, and again, good to have a member of Abby's group back in their position. So we know now, if Manny's back there, well, I guess all the rest of Abby's group are back in Seattle. So Dina had the right idea to wait till they got back home.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I think that's everything. Any notes, Derek?
Just one note to mention that Eugene was brought up once again. Eugene was the one that knew the WLF. It's just because he's been mentioned in the first 3 episodes, and this new character of Gail, the psychologist or psychotherapist, is his wife. So we will be seeing the character of Eugene later on in the season. We know that for definite, but just interesting to keeping the name in our head. I'm looking forward to seeing why they've dedicated to an episode to Eugene in a 7-episode series, and we're already at episode 3. So I wonder why his character is so important.
Yeah, no, it is really intriguing.
Yeah. Anything else from you, John? Any notes? Anything else we haven't talked about?
No, nothing from me.
Excellent. So overall then, what do you think of the episode? What's your overall final thoughts?
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I would give this 5 clicker Groots out of 5.
5 clicker Groots. I am infected.
Yeah, exactly. I just really like the interpersonal dynamics here on this episode. It provided a breath from the action of episode 2. It reconnected us with that characterization. It really brought in, again, it's one of the intriguing things, this notion of justice for something that equally is what Abby is striving for. It's the same side of 2 different sides of the coin, in a sense. And when you have that, it is the inability to square the circle because, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. I'm looking for justice. Well, I'm looking for justice.
Absolutely.
And it's back and forth. And in the end, it is that mess.
It's the spiral of violence just goes on forever.
Exactly.
Yep.
I need this. No, well, I want that. No, I feel so. In the end, it's just this spiral of like dreadfulness that can result, and it's misjudging. It's all, and I think it's really important to kind of put that across. And I think you have Gail questioning Ellie to Tommy, and I think that's really important to do. I like that the show does that.
Yeah.
Yes, her quest for justice disguised, her quest for vengeance disguised as justice, as Gail, identifies, it is that. But whether it's wrong is another matter. That's something hugely personal. It's to the point of the conversation, that Gail had in the hospital with her. And that, well, he said this to me. Do you know what that means? And she says, well, she's not willing to go there. Yeah. It is all bottled up.
Absolutely. And I think she even says, I wish I could have let him off the hook for the thing that he felt he wronged me, but maybe I should let myself off the hook for not allowing him off the hook before he died.
Exactly.
Using her pop psychology to get herself out of that situation. But absolutely, it's so important that Ellie knows her own mind and knows how everybody else is trying to attack her vengeance story, I suppose. And I think this episode did such a good job with that.
Even her taking Jesse's advice, is that because that was a calculated measure in order to get the result that she wanted, for example.
She's a liar, yes.
I love the fact that we got introduced in quite a brief way, the Seraphites. Again, I think generally the interpersonal sort of development between characters here is so good and really a nice beat coming off of the sort of more action orientated second episode.
Absolutely.
And the consequences of that. Yeah. So for me, 5 clicker Groots out of 5.
Fantastic.
I am infected.
Excellent.
Derek, what about yourself? For episode 3, The Path.
Yeah, I love this episode. I thought it was really, really good. And I think this is why I like the story of The Last of Us and how they're translating it to the TV show. The moments between characters are really important, and that's what they added to the story in season 1 that, may not have been as present in the game. The game is a game. It's about running around and killing things and experiencing the story and walking through the story. But sometimes you miss things that are in the corners that were present in the game. And what Craig Mazin is doing is bringing them to the forefront. As far as I remember from the game, the characters, the Seraphites, the religious order that we see, or the religious group that we see in the episode here, as far as I remember, those were notes that you had to take the opportunity to pick up and read. And you don't always do that when you're playing a game. Maybe you only have an hour to play and you don't want to sit down and read notes for the entire hour. But bringing it forward and showing them as a group of people of belief and that they're terrified of this group of the wolves adds so much to what Ellie and Dina don't know is coming. If that makes sense. It's without Dina and Ellie falling into a bad situation, you've just told them, they have no idea this group murders children, murders anybody that isn't part of their group, that's quite a big situation to fall into. And they could have just left it for that camera pan back at the end of the episode to say there's a lot of them, but that doesn't really matter. Showing what they actually do to another group is much more convincing about how terrifying the situation that Ellie and Dina could be walking into is.
And it's kind of in the battle for survival against the infected, even people that should be allies in that, which are other humans, effectively, uninfected humans, are not necessarily always allies in that. The power struggle. We're quite a destructive race, really.
Sure
even when on the brink of destruction, there's always the power play to be had.
Yeah.
In order to possibly destroy everything before even the mushrooms do. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, it's really interesting. We don't know why the wolves have done this to the Seraphites, including kids, in the same way that Jackson didn't know why those people had killed Joel. And this is the danger of it all.
Exactly.
As well.
It's almost like you've been watching Andor, John, in your concept that humans, even though they might be on the same side, don't always work together for the common good. Because that's also the theme of the first 3 episodes of Andor as well. But anyway, that I think is it for our wrap up of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3. But let's get down to the pub, have a little drink, pour one out for our man Joel, and go to the Last of Us World's End pub quiz.
Pour one out, grab one of those beers off Gale, because we are at the Little League for the Last of Us World's End pub quiz. Fellow quizzers, fellow survivors, fellow funguis, it is question 3 that we're on to. When Ellie arrives in Joel's house, there are 2 carved birds on his workbench. What birds are they? And for an extra point, what other carved animal is in the room?
Fantastic. Let's see how good Joel is at carving and see if we can identify the creatures that he's carved there. John, do you want to get the question one more time?
Certainly. When Ellie arrives in Joel's house, there are 2 carved birds on his workbench. What birds are they? And for an extra point, what other carved animal is in the room?
Excellent. Question 3 of 7 there. Email your 7 answers at the end of the season to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, and you could be in with a chance of getting your hands on some Last of Us goodies, as we've mentioned earlier on. Just a little bit of feedback on this episode. Over from our Facebook group, we got a message in from Victor Von Doom, who says the conveyance of the overall grief of Jackson was palpable here. The 3-month cleanup of Jackson must have been horrific on its own. I felt the call for mercy from Carlisle, opposite set support for Ellie, and revenge against the backdrop of violence brought by the infected made for a great scene. I noticed the series had to scale down Abby's physique from the game. Live action Ellie would not have a chance against that character. Dina and Ellie better do some serious recon before heading into Seattle. Thanks, Victor. I think they're walking in there, whistling away, going, yeah, Seattle looks really empty. There's only going to be 10 people in here, 5 of them being from Abby's group. I think they're going to have to see something, in case they get caught up by the group of wolves. Yeah. As for Abby's physique from the game, this was something that they did in the game where it was effectively Abby, after losing her father at 15 or so, 19, wasn't it? When her father died, the 5 years intervening, she spent time working out. That was how she worked out her frustration. Here for the show, they've kind of said, look, they just cast the right actor in the role. And I do think Caitlin Deaver's doing such a great job as Abby, as we've seen her in those first 2 episodes. I think she's just giving such a great performance that, do you go after someone that looks like the character or someone that acts better? And I think the show The Last of Us is really focused on the people who are the right actors for the role rather than someone that just looks like the character, Otherwise, I guess you could do an animated show where you just draw the characters the same as the characters in the game, I don't think they necessarily have to look like Abby.
No.
Especially in the game because you play as Abby as well. That's probably the reason why she has a similar physique or a stronger character than Ellie in the game, because you're playing as her, so she does different things than Ellie does in the game.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I'm. It doesn't bother me either way. I think as long as they nail the character, I think they can be petite and strong, even physically.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't think you need to just be muscle bag. So I think there is a strength there with Abby.
Yeah. And also Ellie got taken out pretty quickly walking into that room, so she's going to have to be very careful.
Yeah. And I think to Victor, you know, serious recon is required by Dina and Ellie before they head into Seattle. I kind of agree. I think that town council thing is a real important scene for Jackson, for Ellie, for people associated with her, like Tommy and Dina, who are all there, you know, listening to Rachel, Carlisle, Seth, as well as Ellie, and hearing the decision. And despite that Ellie ignores it. So, you know, again, it's a really important character point here. And I think that is sort of, you know, that's just highlighted by the conversation that Gail and Tommy have at the Little League as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah, really good stuff. Thanks, Victor.
Absolutely. Thanks, Victor, so much. We do want to hear all of your thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2. We'd love to get your emails into feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop it over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries to leave your thoughts on the spoiler posts over there. As we mentioned later on this week, we'll be going back to the cinema for the MCU to watch Thunderbolts. Is it a hashtag or is it an asterisk, John? It's an asterisk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thunderbolts asterisks coming out, and we will find out what that asterisk means after watching the cinema, I think.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I'm not convinced. Not convinced by the asterisks.
Apparently, there's a massive confusion because one of the cinema chains had an asterisk with 6 points on it, and another cinema chain had an asterisk of 5 points on it. So
no.
They tried to tie it in with the asterisks in the Thunderbolts, and somebody got it wrong. Nobody knows why.
Oh, okay, grand.
But there you go. We also just finished our coverage of Daredevil Born Again. You can go and listen to that over on tvpodcastindustries.com.
Yes, and our roundup of the pub quiz over there as well.
Exactly. But that's it for our coverage of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3. We'll be back next week for the 4th episode of The Last of Us. Can't wait to see how the story continues over there. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next time.
Yes, thanks so much, fellow survivors, for joining us for this discussion of The Last of Us Season 2. Remember, until then, keep watching, keep listening, and of course, keep surviving. This was brought to you by the Irish Mushroom Board.
Bye.
Bye.